Greetings. My name, Masachaba Baloyi. I'm the CEO and founder of IndiePath Human Capital. We are your guide to building and sustaining a high-performance culture. It's almost the end of the third quarter. Perhaps you're feeling a little fatigued, tired, despondent. But may I remind you, and I quote former President Thabo Mbeki, those who complete the course will do so only because they do not, as fatigue sets in, convince themselves that the road ahead is still too long, the inclines too steep, the loneliness impossible to bear, and the price itself of doubtful value. Welcome to the Moments of Impact. Allow me to take you back to the year 1974. Imagine a young girl, aged 14, possibly in grade 9, very tiny and petite in frame, gets into a bus to and from school every day. She over time observes some injustice. The bus, 2 front seats rows, were often reserved just for whites. On one fine morning, this little girl decides she will not conform. She's going to defy the odds. So she takes up space. She assumes position, settles into the whites-only seat, making all the elders very uncomfortable. So she starts haggling with the bus driver about why she should conform. Nobody's here anyway to see, and those seats are often never occupied. That's how she finds herself on the side of the road, embarking on her first long road to school. That young lady has gone on to serve the first democratic parliament of South Africa. She served in 3 cabinets under the leadership of President Nelson Mandela and President Thabo Mbeki. She's the Chancellor of the Nelson Mandela University, Chairman at Tiger Brands, an Executive Director at Standard Bank, the Lead Independent Director at Exaro. Allow me to introduce Dr. Geraldine Fraser Moleketi. How do you do?
I'm fine. How are you, Masachaba?
I am very well. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your passion. Wow. What do you consider to be the makings of a good leader?
Well, you know, you've related a story earlier, and I'm going to come back to that story. But I think part of it is tenacity, being bold and being willing to lead, because being in a leadership position means that you've got to be able to take difficult decisions. But a leader is not about being an individual. It's also the person who has the ability of building a team around him or herself, but above all, being able to draw on the talents and strengths of each of the team members. Right now, I play a role in more non-executive positions. So as the chair of Tiger Brands, mine is heading up that board. And I think the beauty of the board is we've got quite a diverse team. So there's people with bench strength in the FMCG sector. I mean, Tiger Brands is after all the largest FMCG listed company on the African continent, 100 years old. So quite a lot of experience behind it. And the current team brings together diversity. So it's being able to lead a diverse team and draw the best out of everyone, understanding the team and not cowed by the fact that in instances you must have people who have more knowledge in specific areas than yourself as a leader. And this is something that's carried me over time. Being able to, when leading that team, having the knowledge that you need to at times defend the team when it's challenging. And that's especially to the external, but internally, you've got to have a space where you engage with no holds barred. And it's simply because you don't give an inch, not to yourself or for yourself or to anyone else. And I'd finally say, so I spoke about team, I spoke about talent through diversity and diverse talent, but also diversity in the composition of the team, men, women, intergenerational if possible, bringing, the demographics of the continent or South Africa in that team, so that diversity is there. And that was the combination of talent as well, but ensuring teamwork. So I've spoken to all three. So coming back to the 14-year-old girl, those 4 rows at the front was not only empty, sometimes it was most of the time, and it was, as in those days where racially there were areas that were not supposed to be accessible to non-whites. We've broken that down, and I've been part of that change. Similarly in Tiger, when we do things, we do it together because we see this company as making changes within itself and beyond itself, because we will not accept mediocrity. So as you say, it's the last part of the year. It's a difficult time, pushing targets and all. But at the end of the day, it's because we say we can do it. We've got to change where the share price is at this point in time, because it's possible.
Absolutely. Now, it takes a lot of courage, boldness, which you've demonstrated over decades, to make decisions. How do you make a decision? How long does it take you to decide?
Well, it depends on the nature of the decision. I mean, some will take longer than others. But on taking a decision, you've got to take advice from people. You've got to look at what are the sources that you need to draw that advice from at a given point. If that information is not readily available, and the decision is such that it will impact not only internally, but externally, you take your time, but it can't be unduly long. So in certain instances, we say, depending on what it is, we can give ourselves a week and come back. Other decisions are decisions that you can take faster. So if there's a decision that's around, for example, injustice in the workplace. What's very obvious is that there's a particular value system, and if you feel that is breached, you've got to take steps to deal with that. If there's a need for information to inform that, again, you'll say, we need a report, but it needs to be done in the shortest space of time. Because injustice is not something you want to have brewing. And that is also impacting on the culture of a company or organization. So act swiftly where you can, act fairly, act impartially, and have the same approach to everyone, even if you take into account contexts that may differ and vary.
Oh, wow. That is remarkable. You often have to work with different people in different organizations in which you serve. What skills, and it could be soft skills, what attributes does one need to develop to survive the ever-changing times? You've kept yourself relevant from politics into corporate, social justice, the UN. What attributes would you say one needs to develop to survive the as-is?
So let me talk about the current period we've just come through, and that's COVID, you know. So we've had 2 years of a pandemic that's becoming endemic. And this has been the most alienating period, I think, in the workforce and for people. Because when you talk about the attribute, a lot of it is about personal engagement, being able to talk to people, understanding them, and so on. COVID removed that. And it made us think about the world differently and also think about the workforce differently.
Yeah.
And the attribute in this instance was being compassionate,
Yeah.
and being inclusive in how you deal with things. So on the one hand, and let me use this example since I started out with it, during COVID, it was the blue-collar workers and the factory workers that had to be on site. As Tiger Brands, we're in the food business, and food security is important. It's critical. So people had to go to work. And Tiger Brands, at the level of the CEO, senior management, at the level of the board, had to look at how were we able to ensure the safety of our workers whilst guaranteeing the food security. And Tiger Brands made that happen through the measures they put in place. They had to, in certain instances, look at transport for workers. Very basic thing that's taken for granted, because that's the factory worker. They also they had to look at the issue of PPE to ensure the effectiveness and participation of workers. They had to ensure compliance to the most stringent safety measures so that a shopper, a customer, would be assured that we were taking measures that wouldn't put them and their families at risk. And it was critical, but we made it happen. So you've got to think beyond yourself. Don't look at yourself in the boardroom and assume that is the begin all and end all. Those of us in the boardroom could engage through virtual means.
Yeah.
It was the factory worker that was the most important. So imagine yourself as a leader in the role of the worker that makes a difference every day. At a global level, I worked with diverse teams, and you've got to take into account that diversity brings with it its own culture dynamics. And you've got to operate within that environment. So get people to work together across different cultures. It's not difficult, but it's not the simplest thing as well.
Absolutely.
And this is about understanding that diversity makes us stronger. So diversity is not an impediment, it's a strength globally. Because if we engage across different cultures, different languages, different geographies, it makes us better people, and it makes the world a better place.
It cannot be a single story.
No.
But you've served under the leadership of the great. Former President Nelson Mandela. How would you describe in 3 words that experience?
Well, it was clearly a great honor and privilege, but I think let's also combine it with the period.
Oh, wow.
We were pioneers, and we were pioneers in a team. It was not individual. So President Nelson Mandela never saw himself as this Messiah. He saw himself as part of a leadership collective, and he led a team. He was very clear on certain things. You had to ensure that you prepared rigorously. You had to do your best, and you didn't do it for President Nelson Mandela. You did it for the people of South Africa. And I think being part of that original team, you know, it was a huge honor. Sure. But such a responsibility, because at the end of the day, the view was, if I don't deliver at the levels required, I'm not failing myself. I'm not failing President Mandela, I'm failing this country. And I think that's what we need, is bringing together that sense of we must do our best, because only the best is what's needed to make a difference. And it's not about yourself. It's about the millions out there.
Wow. Bring your best self. Serve. Do the best that you can with what you have. Thank you for that. But how do you replenish after making all these decisions that impact on millions of people?
So there's a few things. I think I have the good fortune of having a good, solid family. Yeah. My strongest critics and yet my greatest supporters. Oh. They don't spare inch. And now I've got 2 grandchildren as well. So whether it's the extended family, whether it's the nuclear family, or now with the grandchildren, that's where I draw a lot of strength and my joy. But I also like walking.
Oh, wow.
And go out to the Waterberg or go down to Cape Town and listen to the ocean crashing on the rocks. I think it replenishes the soul. Yeah. And reading, just reading.
On that note, what are you reading right now?
You know, I don't read one book.
Oh, wow.
I sort of read many books at the same time. But a book that I recently read, and I've actually got to go down and look at the name of it again, is The Water Dancers. I just finished it last week. I read it over 3 days by Ta-Nehisi Coates. You know, talks about slavery and the experience of a slave and all that. So I quite enjoyed it. It was a light read, you know. I also have, in that pile of books, I've got Conundrum of A Still Wretched of the Earth, which is about Côte d'Ivoire.
Right.
And it talks about the challenge in the not-so-distant past, and this was written by Abamule Aroachi. I think that's how you pronounce it, so that's one of the other books that I'm reading. And then I was preparing a public lecture at Nelson Mandela University, where I'm the Chancellor. I did it on Raymond Mhlaba, so I did that just more than a week ago. And I went to pull a book off the shelf by Andre Odendaal that's called Dear Comrade President.
Oh, wow.
And it was discussions with President Oliver Tambo during the, you know, the development within the African National Congress at the time, looking at developments of both the Constitution, so preparing for negotiations and the transition. But it was more because I was also wanting to get into the minds of that collective of leaders, because Wamray, as we refer to him fondly, was part of the Rivonia trialists, served on Robben Island. And that was a special ilk of leadership. People who were ready to sacrifice their all in the interest of a larger good. And I think that's so much needed at the moment.
Absolutely. Too. I mean, I can't imagine 2.5 seconds in prison. And you were in solitary confinement.
Yeah, it was only for 17 days.
Did you hear that? Only for 17 days, I'll do life by myself in the cell somewhere. How did you survive that period? What kept you were young?
I was young. I was 21, just 21st birthday. It was difficult, so I shouldn't pretend that it wasn't. But at the same time, I was allowed to have 2 books with me.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into the 2 right now. But I think it led to a lot of reflection. And I think the biggest issue then is loneliness. And because part of the time I was in a police cell in solitary confinement, there was a very small opening where light came through. And it made me appreciate light. And hence I spoke earlier about, you know, the Waterberg going out to the Highveld, also the ocean. But I am privileged. I've got a beautiful garden. I like lots of light and garden. So what got me through it was because at the time I was involved in a cause that I considered paramount. It was a cause for social justice. And that's why, as I said to you, it was only 17 days. There were many who had been incarcerated for much longer, including in solitary. And part of it is an attempt to break your spirit. And the human spirit is resilient, you know. So it's saying that there is a larger cause. There's something bigger. There's a value system that I see as quite central to my being. And I'm not going to give up on that.
Guys, this is what it took for you and I to have the opportunities that we have. It took resilience, tenacity, courage, teamwork, camaraderie. Come on, South Africa. I plead with you. Come on. Let's get to work. Let's get going. Let's do the best that we can. It's stories like these that have to urge us to be more, to do more. And how fortunate are we that we still have our leaders that have lived through that journey, that are directing and guiding us. Come on. I plead with each and every one of our community. Just do the best that you have. At least you're doing it in a society that is enabling. Thank you so very much, Dr. Geraldine.
Thank you for your time.
This has been remarkable. I cannot thank you enough. I cannot imagine what it's taken. I cannot imagine how you had to unlearn and how you had to forgive so you could lead. But for that, I say thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope, until next time, this encourages you to succeed. And if you're not in a position of employment, don't give in yet. Don't give in. Don't give in. We will get through. This is in our DNA. My name, Masachaba Baloyi. I'm the CEO and founder of IndiePath Human Capital. We are your guide to building and sustaining a high-performance culture. Thank you.